in consideration of the lumbar spine, there's a number of things we want to go back to Friday and look for.
I have a question before
Yeah,
you
what's
start.
up?
I was looking at the pages,
Uh-huh.
and it goes cervical spine, 1 through 11, then lumbar spine,
Mhm.
then it goes straight to supine.
Yes.
That's right?
Yeah, so with the lumbar spine, I wanted to differentiate a lot of the techniques are supine, and then the QL work and something else was sidelining.
Okay.
So that's all lumbar spine work, and then we'll do scoliosis.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so we want to look for what's going on, to keep it simple, between the mid-dorsal hinge and the sacrum. So that's going to tell us a lot about what deviations we want to focus on for the lumbar spine. Generally speaking, things that affected our pelvic tilts, either right and left, anterior, posterior. Tilts of the thoracic spine and ribs, posterior and anterior. Or lateral tilts of the ribs, and rotations. Those are really the three kind of dimensions we want to look at. So if we start with anterior and posterior tilts, let's have you face the wall this way. What I can tell you guys, maybe a little bit more oblique so they can see you. So, yeah, is he's relatively balanced front to back. There aren't any major, like, when we assess them or when you assess them day one thing we notice is that there isn't a lot front to back. He might have a slight posterior tilt of those ribs, but it's not anything major. Pretty balanced front to back. Now, if you face your back toward them, so face that way. Now here we see a lot more right to left. One thing we noticed was this right side was compressed. So lateral tilt of the ribs, probably a high right hip, so a left tilt of the pelvis.
Big time.
So right side's high. One thing we didn't do yesterday is you can go in and feel the space or the length between the ribs and the pelvis. So it's definitely compressed here. Right? If we did that kind of slide, so if you stay where you are, Claudio, just arms to the side and then slide down and slide down. So go to the left first. And back. And to the right. So it actually seems more restricted going to the right. It's very interesting. So where do you feel that? Let's go back to the left first. Go to the left. And where do you feel it catch?
Sort of like right at the crest right here. That's where it catches. That's where I feel it the most.
Okay. And what about back to the right?
I feel like I'm kind of like stopped right here. I mean, it catches right here, but I think the biggest thing is right here.
It's like your roots are hitting
Yeah. So we, again, opening that space is going to be kind of priority number one. We're not going to find a big role in that for him. And once we do that, we might be able to see more bends in his spine so that when the scoliosis work comes up, that'll be easier. So face us if you would. The last thing is rotations. We want to look at where his secondary rotations are. As far as if you create a line between internal, external serratus, internal, external serratus, which line is shorter? Right? So it's essentially another X here. Another way to think about it is rib to ASIS versus rib to ASIS, which is shorter. And you can kind of see with Claudio with the shifts that way and this way, that this leg is shorter. You see what I mean? Yeah. So he's here. So that line gets shorter. Yes? Y'all see that? So we're going to want to work. So part of your demo list is lower spiral line, because everybody always asks, how do you work spiral? How do you work spiral? And it's really important to unwind the body. We'll work the lower portion of the spiral and the torso, internal to external to serratus. So we'll be fascially opening all of that up. And you can work that portion of the line and you'll see a major difference in the rotations. Yeah. And you always want to me, address those before you start addressing spinal rotations, which we'll do in a second demo. So you'll find ways to bring, kind of bridge these two demos together. I separated them just because we have a long day. We want to assess more, and it's just less load for your trades. But you can do it all in one kind of swoop when you work on people. Okay. So of the techniques we have, some of them don't really apply to Claudio, but we're going to do them anyway. Some of the rectus abdominis stuff, that's really big for people who are collapsed through the front, stoop posture, posterior tilt kind of stuff. Not a big deal with Claudio. He's pretty open, although he does have a bit of an anterior shift, posterior tilt slightly, so maybe some upper abdominal stuff, but we'll just have to see.
You said he has anterior tilt, posterior?
anterior shift of the pelvis and posterior tilt of the ribs. Slight, when you look at him from the side, so if you face me, very, very slightly, he does slide forward and then tilt back. But it's minimal. And it's, you know, any of this rounding in his shoulders is responding to that, because they're pretty stationary. But if you had to pick a portion on this perspective to say he's tight, it's gonna be right in here. And that's because his ribs are pulling back in response to his pelvis. And actually looking at it now, he may have a slight anterior tilt. Do you remember when you assessed him if he was anterior tilt?
I felt like he was very even, but more,
So pretty neutral.
yeah,
Any tilt in the legs?
yeah, they were, anterior.
Yeah, so the anterior tilt in the legs, I mean, that tells us that he is shifted in the pelvis. Yeah. And so that's more of, you know, hip flexors to the back. And when he side bends, he feels it more hip flexor, you know, like TFL, rectus femoris, that kind of stuff here into abdominal wall. And that's a lot with that shift. Yeah. So because of that shift there, when he side bends, he's going to feel that here. Some people feel it back here, some people feel it in their glutes. It's just all relative. So, our plan with Claudio, when we get to the pertinent stuff, is going to be the opening of the left spiral line. Okay? And then a lot of work, when we do QL and a lot of the lateral work, we're going to focus on his right side to try to lengthen that out. So what we want to look for post-work is that he's longer on the right side, that when he side bends, he doesn't get caught on that right side. That's what we're going for. That's the goal. And that should help his lumbar spine. But he's a pretty good candidate. His lumbar spine doesn't scream at you like, help me, but it's like, you know, a little peep. It's definitely worth working on. So, y'all watch that show, Peep? Y'all don't have kids. Okay. All right.
No,
Well,
there's-
Annie does.
Yeah.
It's pretty sweet.
You have to do that.